Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin by saying, in the name of Allah, the creator of all things, seen and unseen. And about him we say, Alhamdulillah, all praise, all thanks, all gratitude belongs to him and him alone. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And I bear witness that nothing has the right to be worshipped except the one true creator of all things. Wahdahu la sharika lah. And he is alone and he has no equal. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. And I bear witness that Muhammad is indeed his servant and his last and final messenger. How is everyone? Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. The reason you saw me playing about with my phone is that we're also broadcasting this live on Facebook. Facebook has enabled people with verified pages to go live on Facebook, and alhamdulillah, this trip I've been testing it out and it's been quite successful. The last live feed we had 16,000 people watching. I just started, we have 500 already with us, so people will continue to join throughout the program. So we're able to reach a bigger audience, inshallah. My story, how I came to Islam. You know, it's it's almost 17 years to the day now. And I think the only reason I remember all of the details is because I've been telling the story for about, a decade at least. Or else it probably would be, a faint, distant memory. I've been Muslim almost as long, exactly long as I've been non-Muslim, as I was not a Muslim. So, next year it'll go across the barrier to, I have been Muslim longer than I would have been not a Muslim. And I don't know if I might be 50 years old and still be telling the story of how I came to Islam. I was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, in the United States. So I was born and raised in the South. And a lot of you, how many of you have been to America? Raise your hand. You've been to America. How many of you have ever been to the South? I'm not talking about Florida, because Florida we don't consider the South. I'm talking about Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Kentucky. Yeah, that's the South. And the South of the United States is a bit different than anywhere else in America, and I would say most places on the planet Earth. The South is a bit different. And a lot of people that have never been there have these, these ideas of, a lot of rednecks and things of that nature, which it's not totally wrong, but the South does have some things about it that are actually quite interesting and quite unique that you would not find anywhere else in America, that I found to be quite beneficial growing up. One of the things that I like about the South, and even my wife noticed when she first went to the South, she had never been to the South of the United States, was how well-mannered everyone was. People open doors for you. People call you ma'am. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, sir. No, ma'am. And she was surprised, like, wow, people still do this? I'm like, this is how we've always done this. It's something that's ingrained into Southern people for us to have manners. I was taught manners as a young man before I was taught anything else. You are respectful to people who are older than you. You say, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, please, thank you, you're welcome. This is something I didn't really have to think about as a child. You don't become disrespectful. Even if I looked at my grandmother, you know how you guys give that look to your parents sometimes, like that, that roll your eyes. If you rolled your eyes at my grandmother in my home, you would get knocked across the room. And it was almost reflex from my grandfather, I wouldn't even see it coming. He was like a ninja with it. And my grandfather loved me to death. I loved him to death. But at the same time, I had a very healthy dose of fear of him. And that's something that we find missing in the youth today. You don't see a lot of that respect and a fearful respect towards parents anymore. You see children who just say anything, any kind of way to their parents and speak to them in any sort of manner. And I'm looking around like, you would not live in my house like that. You wouldn't survive a day growing up with me like that. Because I try to tell parents who have children, alhamdulillah, I have 3. If you want to be your children's friend, you want them to be able to come to you and talk to you about things. But if they don't have a healthy dose of fear, of you, a little bit of respect that tinges on fear of you, whom they see every single day. How are you going to teach them to have fear and respect for Allah, whom they never see? How? You see, this is ingrained from childhood. And we've kind of sort of fallen behind on that just a little bit. But that was just a quick side note. I was born in a very conservative religious family. I grew up in church as a normal conservative Christian Southern boy would have. We went on Sundays, Sunday evenings, Wednesdays, holidays. The church was on the same street as my home. The street I grew up on had two churches, one on each end. I lived very close to the Methodist church, and that's the one I attended, United Methodist Church. On the other end, there was an evangelical church that was heavily focused on missionary work, and I had been there a few times and would go there later on when I would become more evangelical in my beliefs. And as a young man, I grew up not really studying religion. It was more of just this is how I was brought up. This is how I was brought up. It wasn't until the age of 14 when I started to attend youth services and young life that I became more actively involved in Christianity, more actively involved in reading the Bible, more actively involved in wanting to be involved in the church, be involved. I decided at a young age I wanted to become a minister. I wanted to become a youth pastor. I wanted to become a missionary. There's a lot of things that I wanted to do, but I wanted to have my life revolved around the church because my good friend was the youth pastor of our church. I knew a lot of the people that I had met through young life, and they were very influential figures and things of that nature. And I also want to let you know two real small things. Number one, I'm not going to be able to give you every single detail of what happened in my journey to Islam, because we're talking about a few years worth of information. Yeah? And I can't keep you. We have the room till 8. I have 2 hours. I'm not even going to take that long. I'm going to be about 45 minutes, so there'll be time for Q&A. So I'm compressing a lot of information down to a very short amount of time. So yes, there's things I'm going to have to leave out. There are parts of the story that might not seem to connect. But rest assured that if you go and watch the many times I've told this story, every time I try to, add some other pieces in that have happened so that, people can watch different versions and get the full context, then you can do so. It's on YouTube. Just go the same topic, how the Bible led me to Islam. There's times where I've spent 2 hours telling it and told more, so you can fill in the pieces, God willing. Also, know that this is not an attempt at an attack on any religion, especially Christianity that I came from. But in order to do justice to the story, if you want to know how I ended up becoming a Muslim from Christianity, well, then I got to tell you what changed my mind. I have to tell you. I have to be honest. That's the whole point of the topic. But it's not an intent on any slight in any way. The thing that became a catalyst for me to eventually leave Christianity was my studies in the Bible, especially things such as textual criticism, studying some of the historical references and how the Bible came to be and how Christianity, as I knew it, came to be formed through the councils of Nicaea and things of this nature. So going and kind of doing the background research on how I got to where I was in belief in my life led me to make the decision that would alter my life forever. Alter my life forever. And it's interesting, because the topic was how the Bible led me to Islam, that it was me digging deeper into the Bible that led me to be where I am today. I wouldn't say that I fully encompassed all that knowledge at that moment. I have still been studying these topics for 17 years now, because of the fact that I wanted to continue to be able to justify my change in my life and to be able to explain to other people in depth why I made this change. So it's something I've continued to study. But I'm only going to tonight to be able to give you the very brief highlight reel. Like if you were to go home tonight and watch the news and they were to talk about the football game, would they show you the whole football game on the news? No, they would show you, a few clips of the football game that were kind of catalyst moments that made or break, that made the game what it was. So that's what I'm going to be able to give you tonight, is the highlight reel a few snippets of information that kind of became pivotal points of me changing my direction in my life. The first point was when I began to read the Bible from cover to cover, which is, it's a big book. It's not your average religious text. It comes from the Greek word biblios, which means a collection of books. It's more than one book. It's a number of books back to back to back to back. But there were a few things that caught my attention that made me start to question some of my preconceived notions about life and about religion and about God and about Jesus, etc. The first of them became the stories of the prophets in the Old Testament. Because growing up as a young man, you know, I was taught about the prophets, and we were taught the good thing about Noah and the flood, you know, David and Goliath. We were taught about, you know, Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah, and we were taught about Jesus and his feeding the fish, feeding the thousands with the fish and the loaves of bread, and the Sermon on the Mount, and the Beatides, and the trial, crucifixion, death, resurrection story. You know, we were taught these stories. It wouldn't be till I picked the book up and read it from myself to come to realize that there are actually some much different and much darker stories about some of these same men in the Bible. And yes, I was taught that God can use even sinful people for good causes, that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, that every human being had inherited sin through Adam's initial sin in the garden, etc., so on and so forth. But the depth and gravity to which some of these evils are so great that I can't really tell you them verbatim. Even some of these stories, I wouldn't quote them verbatim just in case some child watches this, some underage person watches this video right now on Facebook. I don't want them. Some of this stuff is not rated for a general audience. And were you to put this in film format, you need ID to see some of these stories. Such as the story of Noah and him becoming drunk. And I could tell you the verse and reference point, but you're going to forget it. So just, if you want to know the very verses, you want to read them for yourself, you don't believe what I'm saying, go home and ask Professor Google, you know, Sheikh Google, Mufti Google, whatever you want to call him. He's very smart. He knows a lot. He knows more about you sometimes, I think, than your own mother. But he'll answer these questions for you really quick. Just Google the keywords Noah, alcohol, and you'll find a story that Noah became so intoxicated at one point where his sons found him in his home, passed out, naked. He was on the floor, stark naked. He had gotten extremely intoxicated. And his sons were embarrassed by seeing their father like this. One of them covered him with his outer garment, and they left. This was a story that just caught my attention. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't the most worst thing, but it was just one of those things that was like, wait a minute. You know, this is the same Noah who, you know, was so attached to God. God spoke to him, told him to build the flood and build the ark and flooded the world. And he chose Noah to be his messenger upon which he revived humanity. You know, but then we see this other side of Noah. Then you go a little bit forward and you find the story of Lot. And the Bible does not reference Lot as a prophet. I'll say what needs to be said. He's not referenced as a prophet. But we believe him as a prophet as Muslims, and he is one of the most famous stories of the Old Testament. Anybody who's worth their weight of salt about the Bible knows the story of Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. But there's another story about Lot that is one of those stories that I have to kind of, allude to what happens. So hopefully you guys get it. There's the story of Lot and his two daughters. Again, you want to find the story? Google Lot, two daughters. And the story was that Lot was an old man and he was getting old and he had no sons. And we know that his wife, what happened to her with Sodom and Gomorrah. But anyway, he had no sons, and his daughters became worried that their father would die without having a son. Now, why would they be worried? Because after he died, if they had no son, they would have no protector. They would have no what is called a wali. They would have no one to look after them, to caretake. They could become public property. Someone could abuse them. It wasn't like they could pick up the phone, call 911. You know, there was no police station and things of this nature. You needed a man in the house. You needed a man in the house. And they didn't have one. So they decided to fix that problem, not by going and finding Lot a wife and things of this nature, no. But the two daughters got him intoxicated, and they both laid with him and became pregnant by him so that hopefully one of them could have a son. This story bugged me because of the simple fact that I didn't understand what I'm supposed to learn from this one. You know what I mean? What is the take-home message? You know, this is not something, and again, it's I'm telling you my thoughts. I'm not trying to make any slide. I'm telling you how I was thinking. I this is not something I'd want to, be read to as a bedtime story. Now, I would not read this to my children as a bedtime story. I wouldn't. This is a story this is kind of a crazy story. The overall theme seems to be so far is that men and alcohol don't mix. Men and alcohol are a bad combination. And I'm asking questions and I'm getting responses that I don't find to be sufficient, which I wish I could go through all of them with you. But the main context was that this is that nature of human beings, that we're always going to be sinful. And God had a different way of dealing with the people of the Old Testament, the old law, the old covenant. And that now has passed because the law was not sufficient to bring people to salvation and justification. Therefore, Jesus came and sacrificed himself for the sins of humanity so that we now could all be saved, which to me was not something I ever logically could wrap my head around. That God would send his message to people for thousands of years, this law that he knew would be flawed and never take them to salvation and never justify them through it. But he sent it to them anyway, made them try. And then thousands of years later came in and was like, I'm going to change the whole thing now. Just believe and you'll go to heaven. That always was something that bugged me. That this doesn't sound fair. It really doesn't sound fair. That these people had to follow all of these rules and it still wasn't going to save them. And now these people, all they got to do is say that they believe and they don't have to do any of the rules and they're going straight to heaven. It was didn't really sound very just. But it was something I never really grasp, but we're not there yet. Then I read the stories of Solomon and David, father and son, prophets, king of Israel's, whatever you want to call them. They were the men who were supposed to be upholding the law of Moses. And the law of Moses was a law that was quite clear. The principal commands were, thou shalt have no other God besides me. Make nothing equal to me. Don't worship any graven image. Don't worship anything on the earth. You worship me and me alone. Do not steal. Do not kill. Do not covet your neighbor's wife. Quite simple, clear commands for worshiping God and having social justice, having order on earth. And these prophets and these kings were supposed to be upholding this law. They were supposed to be the one, making sure this law is followed and enacted on earth. Now you have Solomon, who was known as one of the great builders, one of the great kings of Israel, built the Temple Mount, established a house for the worship of the one true God, which on that place till this day remains a house for the worship of the one true God. Nothing's changed. But it is also a story about Solomon that he had a lot of wives. I mean a lot, like, 1,000. And concubines, which means servants which he had relationships with. And one of them was an idolatress. She worshipped idols from the time of Babylon, from Babylon. But he was so attached to her and had such an affection for her that he started worshiping these idols with her. So now here we have the king, the prophet, Solomon, however he's viewed, the person who's supposed to be upholding the law, breaking the first law. Thou shalt have no other God besides me. Not only did he start to worship these idols, he began to build temples so that other people could worship these idols. So now he's conciliating other people to do the same thing. Now to me, this was a huge conundrum. Because the children of Israel also took a covenant with God. They also had an exclusive covenant with God. And their end of the covenant was that they worship God and obey him. And obey the prophets sent to them. The people I send to you, do what they tell you to do. And in return, I will favor you. And I will always allow you to remain on earth. I will give you exclusivity. Now here we have Solomon breaking the cardinal rule. And now the children of Israel at the time, what are they supposed to do? Are they supposed to follow Solomon and break the cardinal rule? Or are they supposed to disobey Solomon and still break one of the rules of the covenant of obeying those who were sent to them? What do? And if they had, this was my question, if they had followed Solomon and worshipped these idols along with him and died on that, how could God punish them? Because they were only doing what the person whom was sent over them was doing. So this was quite a conundrum for me, hard for me to wrap my... This whole thing is starting to sound unjust. Then we get to the story of David. We all know there's a very beautiful story of David and Goliath when he slayed Goliath the giant. Even in the Bible, it's a beautiful story about how he approached him. Goliath laughed at him. and he spoke very boldly that, I'm here in the name of God, so I'm not afraid of you. But there's another story about David that's quite treacherous. And it's the story of David and a woman named Bathsheba. Bathsheba was a very beautiful woman. And David saw her one day and became so attracted to her that he decided he had to have her. So he had her called to him and he slept with her. Now remember, all these are stories that the Bible said. As a Muslim, I don't believe any of this happened. We don't believe any of this ever happened. It's all allegation. But David called her and he slept with her. Anybody know the problem with this? This woman is married. This woman is married to a man named Uriah, who is in the army. So David has just committed the sin of adultery. And according to the very law which David is supposed to be upholding on earth, the law of Moses, the punishment for the crime of adultery was a capital punishment, stoning to death. Death by stoning was the punishment for adultery. So if David turned himself in, he would be put to death. But he doesn't turn himself in. He decides to fix the problem. And he fixes it by calling Uriah back from the front lines, tells him to go be with his wife in case she's pregnant. Then that could be attributed, because it would be quite hard to explain how this woman is pregnant when her husband's been away in the army. And then while he's with his wife, he writes a letter to the army saying that the next battle, when you have the next battle, put Uriah on the front line, and when the battle is fierce, tell everybody but him to turn around and run, so that he becomes killed. So he sets him up to be killed, sets him up for murder. Conspiracy to commit murder, and murder under the law, that's the same thing in God's eyes. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, do you know who he gives the letter to according to the Bible to have this letter delivered to the army? He gives it to Uriah himself. Seals it and says, deliver this to your commanders. So, this is treachery not only have you been with the man's wife, you're now plotting to kill him, but you make him deliver his own death sentence. Come on. This is a bit ridiculous. A person like this we wouldn't elect as the mayor of London. Yeah? Would you? No. If I had seen Noah in that state that his son saw him in, I wouldn't leave my 5-year-old son alone with him. I wouldn't let Lot anywhere near my daughter. David, I wouldn't even let the man in my house. Because if he saw my wife and decided that she was attractive, I might have to watch my back. I might have to watch my back. This guy might try to have me killed. So I'm now starting to empathize with the children of Israel. Because I'd always been taught that they were very rebellious and ostentatious and they didn't listen. And I'm starting to say, I can understand why. Because if this were the people that were over them, this was their leaders, then how would you expect them to be? Because if you sent these type of people and told them, put them over me, I'm telling you right now, I can understand why you would rebel. I can understand why they would rebel. So I'm having conflicts of faith. But I'm not ready to give up anything right now, because where I was raised in the South, you're either Christian or you're Christian. But that's it. Kind of like Asians, our Asian community. You're either a doctor or you're a doctor. Or maybe you can be an engineer. Maybe. Yeah, it's just, that's the way it was. It's what you expected to be. So, I need to find a way to fix this, trial of faith that I'm having now. So again, I'm speaking to many people. I'm being told the same thing. This is a quite different way that, and it's also an example of why God had to come fix the problem, because even the best of us, even the ones that were, no one's is free from this sin. And that's what was being proven through these men's lives, is that, no one can live without sin. No one can be righteous under the law. Therefore, Jesus had to come and sacrifice himself and change the law over to a law of just believing in his blood sacrifice, etc., so on and so forth. So you need to spend some time with the life of Jesus. And trust me, it'll fix everything and things of this nature. Now, I don't care how many people have railed about me online, and I have had TV shows about how I was never a Christian and this and the other, that I never ever was. I do know at that time I struggled, but I did truly believe in God as a Trinity, God the Father, God the Son, Holy Spirit. These three were one. I did believe that the Holy Spirit dwelled inside of every single believer. And this is how I live my life. But I was struggling right now to comprehend this God that I was taught so many things about is now not only, being this unjust towards people, but is sending these kind of people, over and ruling over everyone. So I begin with the life of Jesus. And again, I could spend an entire lecture, 2 hours, all day on just this very part about Jesus and his nature and what he taught and things of that nature. There's actually one of the DVDs you'll find on the table outside. It's called The True Gospel of Jesus. And another one's called Jesus, the Man, the Message, and the Myth. Those 2 DVDs are an hour long, and I only scratched the surface of this part of the talk. But what I wanted to find out now was, what did Jesus really teach us? What did he really teach us? And I wanted to go in without a preconceived notion. You see, because preconceived notions were already hurting my feelings. My already preconceived notions about the Old Testament I was getting my feelings hurt. So I said, you know what? I'm going to shut off anything that I've been taught as a child, learned. I'm going to see, if I were just to meet Jesus today, according to this gospel, what is he teaching me? What is he teaching me? And I had been involved in some studies because I was intending to roll into Bob Jones University after high school, and the youth pastor was already enrolled, and he was already studying textual criticism and things of that nature, and was teaching me some certain things about textual criticism, analyzing historical documents. And one of the things that I learned through him was, and I've learned through textual criticism now, is called weighing the evidences. For instance, if you have 4 witnesses to a certain event, how do you find out if these 4 people are telling the same thing? You separate each one of them, right? First, you can't keep them together. You got to separate each one of them and then ask them the same questions. What happened? How did it happen? Where did it happen? Who was there? What was he wearing? Things of that nature. And then you gotta weigh that across all 4 witnesses to find out if these people really saw what really happened or not. So this is how I decided to look at the New Testament. Take the witness of Matthew, the witness of Mark, the witness of Luke, the witness of John, and align them in order, which they don't all follow the same order. Things happen at different times, at different places, and they're written down differently according to each and every gospel. But I decided to put them in order. Okay, what was the first thing that happened in Matthew? Okay, let me find that in Mark if it's there, and let me find it in Luke. So I kind of tried to line the entire Bible up like this, so I could get 4 people telling me the same story at the same time. What I came to find out, first and foremost, was that it was not 4 people telling the same story from 4 different vantage points. It was 4 people telling 4 different stories. 4 people telling 4 different stories, and the stories were different in many places, and they were not the same, and they didn't agree in some places, but they cohered around a larger theme, and I knew what the God of the Old Testament said about himself. He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one," and that oneness was a different type of oneness. The oneness, when you go and read the Bible where it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one," that word "one" that is used in the Hebrew language is not the exact same one that they would use in the singular. It's a different type of one. It's a different type of oneness. It's called the unified oneness. Unified oneness. For instance, so our Muslims in the room can also get this. If you take the word "one" in Arabic, what's the word "one"? Wahid. Because Hebrew and Arabic are very similar language, and unfortunately I'm better at Arabic than I am Hebrew. If you take the word wahid and you add it to another wahid, what do you get? Ithnain, you get 2, and you add another one, you get 3. If you cut that wahid in half, you get division, things of that nature. This is not the number that is used in "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one," and it is not what is used when referring to the Creator in chapter 112 of the Quran, verse 1. The same word that is in the Quran, chapter 112, verse 1, is the exact same word grammatically structured as you will find in the verse, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one." And it says, "Qul huwallahu ahad." Say your God is one. This is the exact same. "Hear, O Israel, say the Lord your God is one." But that word ahad is different than wahid, even though they both mean one. But the word ahad is grammatically structured to be unchangeable. You cannot add to it. It can never become ithnain. It can never become thalatha. It can never become a half. It's indivisible. It's unique. It's all by itself. It's alone. This is the exact same thing you find in the Bible. Here is the Lord your God is uniquely one. He's supremely one. He is only one. And even if we do refer to the Creator as Wahid, we say Al-Wahid. He is Al-Wahid. He is the one. We add that definite onto it, meaning that there is no one else that is the one except Him. I can be Wahid, but I can never be Al-Wahid. So this is different. And this is the way God speaks about Himself in the Old Testament. And also, God explains that He is not like anything. The entire book of Isaiah is replete with God speaking about Himself. I am the Lord your God and there is none else. I am the Lord your God and there is none like unto me. I am not comparable. Is there anything you can make comparison with me? So God was not like anything the human being could really imagine. This is why He didn't want you making any graven images to worship, because it would never be like Him. Also, what God wanted from human beings was very clear. He wanted to be obeyed. Or first and foremost, He wanted to be worshipped. He wanted to be worshipped. He wanted you to worship Him. That was cardinal rule number 1. Don't break this rule. Worship me alone. The first commandment, do not make any God equal to me. The English, it says, thou shalt have no God beside me. But the true connotation in the Hebrew language is that you will not make anything equal to me. Nothing is like me. Nothing you give divinity along with me. And also, He wanted to be obeyed. He wanted you to do what He asked you to do. And He wanted you to stay away from what He wanted you to stay away from, because that would bring you success and peace and tranquility in this life and in the next. So follow the law that He sent, because He created you, He designed you. Therefore, He is the best at deciding the operating system that you should live by. Yeah? So when I looked at the life of Jesus, and I wish I had time to go through all of it, I found a Jesus who taught the same things. He taught that God was one. When He was asked what was the greatest law, He said, I can't tell you the greatest law without telling you the first law. And the first law is that the hero is of the Lord your God is one. And you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength. And you should love your neighbor like you love yourself. He said, upon these two principles hangs all the law and all the prophets. That statement alone is one of the most beautiful statements to me out of the New Testament. Because if I were to say to you right now, Muslims, that statement is the religion of Islam that Muslims now practice as a whole, would I be right or wrong? I'd be correct. That is the entire religion of Islam today. Because the pinnacle of Islam is that God is one. We believe that everything exists because of His oneness. If He were not one, and even in the Quran it says, were I other than one, the heavens and earth would fall asunder. So the fact that things exist are an attribute to His oneness. So that's the pinnacle of the entire religion. That's what it's about. But the whole religion as a whole, every law, every ruling, every regulation of Islam, as practiced by billions of Muslims on this planet today, is all divided into two categories. The first category is the rights which belong to the Creator. And the overall spirit of that is that you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength. You give Him as much of you as you can. That's the overwhelming spirit of the rights that belong to the Creator in Islam. You give Him as much of you as you're able. And then the other laws are about the laws between human beings. And the overwhelming spirit and principle of all of those laws is that you treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. Yes or no? This is Islam. And this is what Jesus taught this man, that this is the greatest law. This is what all of the laws hang upon, is these principles. When another man came to Jesus and asked Him, how do I inherit eternal life? He said, obey the commandments. Follow the law that God gave you. He didn't say anything other than that. That's what He said. That's all He said. And He left it at that. The man said, I've done that. Meaning that I'm perfect under that. He said, well then if you're that perfect, then go sell everything you have. And then come and follow me. Come and follow me. Help me. You know what I mean? Hey, we can take another disciple. You know what I mean? You want to get involved. The guy realized what was meant and he left crying. But he didn't stop him and come back and say, look, I'm about to change everything. I'm about to radicalize how God deals with humanity. No, he left it at that. He left it at that. And again, I wish I could just keep going because there's so many replete evidences. But let me make this kind of clear so that later on if somebody wants to discuss with me about this, we can base it on this. Because we could go on and I could say Jesus said this and someone could say, yes, but he also said this. And I could say he said that and they say, well, yeah, he also said this. And that could go on endlessly. And it has. I've sat for hours going on endlessly about that. But this is the problem when it comes to the life of Jesus as narrated by the witnesses of the New Testament. I don't like to say Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John because there's skepticism behind who really, wrote these documents. But the witnesses of the New Testament. Jesus, you'll always find him speaking when he speaks. And I've done this. I've taken out all the statements of Jesus and looked at them. And he always speaks in one of two manners. He always spoke either explicitly, and that was the majority of the time he would speak explicitly. What does explicit mean? Clear, unambiguous. Like for instance, this table is white. It's off-white, but let's just assume it. This table is white. That's explicit. That's clear. You have that nobody could come and misconstrue what color I meant this table was. It's white. And he also spoke implicitly, meaning implied or inferred, up for debate and translation. For instance, if I were to say this table is light colored. Now, if I were to say it was light colored and someone at home that can't see the table, they might think that it might be yellow, it might be beige, it might be tan, it could be many colors. And they could even have a debate about what it really meant. But now when I say it's white, I'm clear. Now, what if today I said that the table was white? But yesterday I told people that it was light colored and they didn't see the table. Who would know better what I meant by the statement of the table? Who would know better what color it was? You guys here today who heard me say it was white. And you could interpret what I meant for the people yesterday when I said it was light colored. You could say he said it was white. Therefore, that's what he meant when he said it was light colored. Correct? This is how you interpret implicit statements of an individual based on their explicits, because this gives you their overall understanding of how they think. The problem with Jesus, peace be upon him's life, is that the flip has happened. His implicit statements have been used to say what he taught, and then his even explicit statements have been interpreted in the light of that. And that's incorrect. That's not correct. That's what I found. This is what I come to realize. That Jesus said God was one. Jesus said the Father is greater than I. Jesus said, I do of myself no thing. Of my own I doeth nothing, but I do it through him who has sent me. Jesus said in John 17:3, this is life eternal, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom you sent. When Jesus was asked about the day of judgment, he said, of that day knoweth no man, not even I. Only the Father who is in heaven knows of that day. So apparently he didn't know what God knew. So he made some clear statements about his relationship with God. Even when he spoke to Mary Magdalene before his ascension into heaven, he said, I have to go and I have to ascend unto my Father and your Father, my God and your God. He equated the God of him with the God of Mary Magdalene. He prayed, he ate, he did all of these certain natures that were not God-like. But then you have statements such as, he who have seen me, have seen the Father. Nobody cometh unto me. I am the way, truth, and life. No one cometh to the Father but by me. These are implicit statements. They could mean many things, and they do mean many things to many different churches. But they have been used to interpret his explicit statements, and this is not justice. It's not justice, because Jesus was also clear about many things. He was clear about many things: to worship God, to follow him, to obey his commandments, to do what he said to do. Jesus ate, he slept, he prayed, he fasted, he became hungry. Things that are not of the nature of the God of the Old Testament. Anyway, what I came to realize also was that there is a lot of discrepancy when it comes to what Jesus really might have said or didn't say. And as I dug further, I came to realize that the Bible I was reading, I was reading the English, and I could never ever say to you that this is exactly what Jesus said in the English language. Number one, English is a language is not even 1,000 years old. Did Jesus speak English? No, he didn't speak English. I don't think. No? No, I don't think so. The oldest existing documents, the King James Version is coming not even off the oldest existing documents, is more off the Latin Vulgate. But nevertheless, you have some newer versions that go off of the oldest existing documents, which are written down in Greek. Was Jesus' everyday language Greek? Is that the language he would have spoken on a day-to-day basis speaking to people? No, he spoke Aramaic, a Semitic language. He spoke a Semitic language known as Aramaic. And there are no Aramaic documents from Jesus, peace be upon him. Not even so-and-so, I heard so-and-so say that Jesus said this in his own original language. Is Greek a Semitic language? No. So when you take a Semitic language like Aramaic, even if what was being passed around at the time when the Gospels were written, the earliest of them, a generation after Jesus was gone, and we don't have the original ones of that anyway, we have copies after copies of copies. But even if the person who wrote it in Greek was writing what he heard Jesus say from so-and-so, from so-and-so, he took a Semitic language and then transferred it into a non-Semitic language. What happens to the meaning of what is said? It changes. 90% of it is gone. That's why there is no translation of the Quran. There's no such thing. You have a translation of the meanings, and even that is based on and biased by the person who is doing it. That's why there's many different versions. That's why we don't have one version. And some of them are flawed more than others. There is no, people ask me, what's the most perfect version of the translation of the Quran? It doesn't exist. It's impossible. Because you're taking the words of the Creator in a language that can't be translated first and foremost, and trying to put them in a 600-year-old language. You're not gonna, nothing you can do here. So this is what, even if we had it, we still lost what Jesus said. Because it was translated or transcribed over from Aramaic to Greek, even if, and then that person who wrote it down was interpreting it, what was meant and what was said, and he could have done anything. So we can never truly say we know what he said. But there was one thing that I did know for sure, so we can wrap this up. Again, I could go on and on. This is what I do. This is not my job, by the way. My job is I'm a businessman. I run a martial arts business. I have a shoe business. I do different things. I'm a businessman. This is what I do because I feel a need. There's a need that is there, and I'm going to try to fulfill the best that I can. I feel responsibility. But again, I could go on. One thing I did know for sure, and this is what I finally asked before deciding to leave Christianity. And again, this wasn't the compendium of what I saw, just a very small snippet. Is God perfect? This was the question I had. Is God perfect? And I'm asking you, is God perfect? Yes. And there's nobody who's going to say God is not perfect. Anyone who believes in an ultimate creator believes that God is perfect. Therefore, by analytical deduction, anything that's from that God would be by its very nature, what? Perfect. That's the only way. If God is perfect and you were to tell me that this is directly from God, by its very nature, logically, it's going to be perfect. It has to be. There's no other. You cannot take imperfection of the perfection of the Creator and then produce imperfection. This is one of the things that would make God no longer God. If he's not perfect, he's no longer who he says he is. So therefore, if God had a book, that book would be perfect. There would not be one single mistake. Not even one. If one disqualifies it. One disqualifies it. One. There would be no issue in it whatsoever. No chain of transmission problem, no textual problem, not even dates getting wrong. Not even number of people at one place at one time and then there was 2 extra added on later. So there's a contradiction in number. No. That's not from God then. If God had a religion, that religion would be flawless. 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 If God had prophets that he sent to humanity, those prophets would have been the perfect human being, the most perfect of us. They would be the best of us. They had to be by their very nature. God would not choose anyone but the best to deliver his message. How are you going to take a perfect message and then funnel it through an imperfect conduit? Because if you take clean water, if I were to take this clean water and then take a dirty tube and pour the water through, what kind of water am I getting out of the other end? I'm getting impure water. That's how the message would be given to us if it was delivered by these type of people. It would be impure because the conduit is impure. So I decided, since I did not find this perfection within what I grew up on, I decided to look for other ways of life. Decided to find God's religion, another way. Let me see. Let me go and explore. But I had a couple of standards now. I had a couple of standards. The number one standard I wanted perfection. I wanted perfection. Once there was a flaw within the system, then the system is thrown out. I'm done with it. One flaw, one mistake, one error. And I wanted that perfection to be shown to me in tangible proof. You see, I set a very high bar. I wanted to see it. I wanted to touch it. I wanted to feel it. I wanted tangible proof. Yeah? So I went around the world's religions asking about this. Let me get some tangible, hard-copied proof. Where is it at? Where's the evidence? Because I don't want to hear what you have to say, because people are very eloquent. You can be fooled by the most eloquent of speaker into believing the most nonsense. Trust me, the media does it to you every day. But I wanted proof. And again, I don't have the time to go through all the things that I saw through the different world religions and their books, and the Talmud and the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the Wiccan Book of Spells and the Hagakure of the Bushido and the teachings of Taoism and things. I don't have. But I will say that the majority of the world's religions have very beautiful teachings in them. For me to say no would be unjust. To say that all world religions are trash. No. All of the world's religions have some beautiful teachings. Absolutely. As a Muslim, we're taught, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ittaqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida. Oh, you believe, fear Allah and say the truth. Speak that which needs to be said. But they all have these inherent flaws somewhere. And I didn't need to see them all, because people are like, how many did you see? What? No. The first one I saw, I was out. I was out. Why? Because if you line 10 glasses of water up in front of me, you blindfold me, but you take 9 of those glasses and replace it with sour milk. The moment I take a sip of that sour milk, how many sips is it going to take for me to realize this is not the glass of water? One sip. Who is the fool? The one who puts that glass down and goes to the next one, or who drinks the entire glass of sour milk thinking that maybe my senses, maybe my smell, maybe this retching vomit that I feel like I'm about to do, maybe that's all fooling me, and this is really the water. Now you would say that I'm just stupid. So you put it down, you go to the next glass. So this is what I did. I read a book about Islam that said that Muslims, M-O-S-L-E-M, which is an attempt at a slight, but the people who did it didn't really understand the Arabic grammar very well, because that word that they tried to use the word dhulam, which means wrong and harm and oppress, and make it Muslim, one who does wrong or oppress, but they didn't realize that there's a grammatical rule difference with that word. It would be dhalim instead of Muslim, but never mind. They said that Muslims worship the moon god called Allah that lived in a box in the desert in Saudi Arabia. And that all Muslims were Arabs who beat their women as a hobby, and that the greatest deed that a Muslim could do was to kill a non-Muslim, and he would get 72 virgins when he went to heaven. I didn't care what proof you had. You understand? If this is your belief system, whatever proof it comes from is flawed. And a little deduction tells me that. Just some logic, simple logic. If this is what you get, I don't care what source you got it from. So I was it. I gave Islam a chance. You know what I mean? I knew you guys didn't have it anyway, but I wanted to say, okay, I did it. I looked at it. Yeah, looked at it. And it was a book I got out of the public library, because we're talking about 1996 in South Carolina. I mean, Islam wasn't really that prominent. The only time I'd ever seen a Muslim on TV was after the 93 Trade Center bombings, Ramzi Youssef. And then he was attached to Osama bin Laden. And let me tell you, whenever a Muslim is accused of any crime, and they find a picture for you to put on the news, they will go through thousands of photos to find the one where you were like, ah! You know what I mean? That you look like you were a homicidal maniac. And that's the one they're going to put on the news. Trust me. And many times when I watch my pictures, I see pictures put on me, posters, stuff like that. I'm like, that's my mugshot right there. I look like I'm ready to eat the audience. Why would you guys use this picture? Anyway, that's all I knew about Muslims. So, since I couldn't find God, I was looking for a God that didn't seem to want to be found. Yeah. I decided to get angry at him. Become angry. Like, you really don't want to be found, do you? And here I am, I'm in high school. I don't know what grade you guys would consider, but I was in, 11th grade at this time, a year away from graduating. All of my friends are out, having fun, they partying, having girlfriends, they look like they're enjoying their lives. And here I am, like a nerd, like a geek, reading books, looking for a God that doesn't want to be found. So you know what? I'm going to make my own way. I never was going to doubt belief in God. That wasn't going to happen. Because my grandfather taught me something very beautiful as a young man when I asked him about why do we believe in God? Even though we've never seen him. And he told me, because there is no painting without a painter. That was a simple logic that that never failed me. There is no painting without a painter. It means if there's a painting, it's because someone painted it. If there's a design, it means someone designed it. If there is creation, someone created it. Yeah, so this is how I knew God existed. Looking at the stars at night, this is logical for me. I wasn't going down the atheist route. So I became someone who was a deist who just didn't care. And I didn't believe God even had a religion anymore. I had made up my mind that God had created the world. Religions were all man-made. And our attempt to find a God that didn't want to be found, because he just created everything and kind of just watched it like a TV show. Just watching what we do, not getting involved, not caring. And at this time, hip-hop was becoming a very big movement in America. And it was just starting to reach the South very heavily. Biggie had just died. Tupac had just got shot. Southern hip-hop was becoming very big with Goody Mob and Outkast. And if you don't know these names, don't go Googling these. You know what I mean? Don't go Googling these names. And so I joined the hip-hop lifestyle. And there's a reason why I say lifestyle. For those of you who think that hip-hop is just music, there's a side note I'm going to make. For those of you who think hip-hop is just music, you've already been fooled. You've already been tricked. Hip-hop is a movement. It's a lifestyle. It's a culture. And if you don't believe me, go and look at some of the statements of the founders of hip-hop. I've had a chance to sit down with people like KRS-One, some of the grandfathers of hip-hop. KRS-One speaks about the origins of hip-hop, and he says himself, this started as a movement, as a lifestyle, as an upliftment for the people, as an awakening for the people. And it was turned into commercialism and taken down another road. But he said it is a way of life. It's a way you walk. It's the way you talk. It's the way you dress. It's the way you behave. All of that's hip-hop. Yeah? So for those of you who think it's just music, you've been fooled. And those of you who think that just because you dress like them and you don't listen to the music, you're not a part of the hip-hop culture, you're being fooled again. If you didn't grow up dressing like that, it's not a norm for you. You didn't grow up talking like that. You didn't grow up walking like that. You didn't grow up, with your mannerisms like that. Then to imitate that is one of the heaviest forms of ignorance. And it's none of it's becoming of a Muslim. None of it. None of it. So unless that's how you grew up and that's how you normally behave, you're imitating something that's not for you. And it's more than music. But I fell into the hip-hop lifestyle. And I was a big fan of Tupac. Thug life. You know what I mean? That's it. I was thug life. Thugged out. I wanted to be a proper gangster. I was 17 at the time. I had gotten my first black belt in martial arts, in Jeet Kune Do. That's Bruce Lee's martial art. I was angry at God, and I had a chip on my shoulder. Those are a dangerous combination, and I thought I was a gangster. It's a dangerous combination, not because I was so bad and tough, but just because I didn't care, and I had the skills to inflict harm. So I was getting in fights in school, getting kicked out of school. I was tearing my grandmother to pieces. I ended up beating up a man at a payphone. because he wouldn't get off of it quick enough. And this was, cell phones weren't, like they were now. Cell phones were these big, huge, massive things, or they were in a bag that you had to carry around with you. If you wanted to get in touch with somebody, you had to page them on a pager, on a beeper, old school beeper, and then you had to go to a payphone and call them back. And I needed to make a call, and this guy wouldn't get off the phone. He got an attitude with me, so I showed him thug life. I mean, that's it. He got a taste of thug life, and I made him get off the phone. But I also put him in the hospital. And his father was a criminal court judge. So yeah, I had my incidences and issues. But there was two things that happened that really made me decide to get out of the thug life business and start, trying to change myself as a human being. Because I went downhill real fast. I'm a perfectionist at heart. Whatever I do, I'm going to do it the best. And I'm going to get there as fast as possible. When I got a first black belt in martial arts, that wasn't enough. I got another black belt, and I got another. Then I got 4 of them. Then I got accreditation, certification, and Krav Maga teachings. That wasn't enough, so I opened a martial arts school. That wasn't enough, so I opened 2. Whatever I do, I'm going to do it really well. And if there's anyone else trying to do it, I'm going to try to beat you at it. That's just how I am. I'm a perfectionist. I'm a competitive person. So when it came to thug life, I was going to jump in real quick, both feet first, and make my point. On the way back home from a party at Clemson University. Clemson University was a university I was supposed to go to after high school and play baseball for on a scholarship. My life could have been totally different. Baseball was my life growing up. Upon being arrested for beating up that young man, they withdrew that offer. But I decided I was going to go party at Clemson anyway. Clemson was known as a party school. We're also a good football team this year. 12-0 undefeated, going to be national champions soon. Nevertheless, I know you guys don't care about American football. But that's my hometown school. On the way back home from a party, me and my friend were intoxicated and we got into a car accident with no one. Basically, I fell asleep in the passenger seat, and 5 minutes later, he fell asleep at the steering wheel. We both decided to take a nap. And that doesn't work when you're doing 80 miles an hour on the highway. So we flipped the car and the car fell into pieces. I just remember waking up to the car, just all kinds of craziness happening. Well, I walked out of the car with no injuries except for a cut that I still bear a scar till to this day, and my friend broke his ankle. Fractured his ankle. It wasn't even really a break. The cop that came said, God has a purpose for your life. You two young men, God has a purpose for you. Because you don't live through things like this without God having made that decision. So you need to figure out what God's purpose is for your life. And inside, I'm kind of laughing. Because I'm like, well, this guy doesn't realize that God doesn't really, want it. Me and God are not on good terms. And I don't think he wants to be found. So I played it off. A short time later, I decided to go to New York City. Yeah? You can't really call yourself a part of the hip-hop scene and you've never been to New York. The home of hip-hop. The roots of hip-hop, Bedford-Stuyvesant, the Bronx, Brooklyn. So I went to New York and I wanted to see what hip-hop was all about. So I went to New York, I went to an ATM machine to take some money. And we're coming to a close in the next 5-10 minutes. I took some money out of the ATM machine and I turned around and I met my first real gangster. My first real thug. Yeah? And when I turned around, this guy had a gun pointed in my face. That's gangster. That's how gangsters do it. You know what I mean? Gun just straight in my face. And he doesn't say anything. He didn't say put your hands up. He didn't say give me the money. Real gangsters don't have time for that. He pulled the trigger. That's how gangsters do it. You know how many times that happens in New York every day where people get robbed and shot for money? I would have been a blip on the newspaper the next day. Some white guy came from South Carolina. We're going to finish regardless. I know guys always come and tell me rush 7 minutes, but we got to get finished. I can't just cut it. We'll try to get it in 7 minutes. Probably going to be about 10. Gangsters don't have time to argue with you. So he pulled the trigger. Blow this kid's head off, take the money and run. But the gun didn't go off, jammed, for whatever reason. So I ended up getting into a fight with him. smashing him through the glass door of the ATM machine, because ATMs, a lot of them in New York are they're in glass rooms where you got to slide your card and go in. But criminals would put rocks on the corner bottom of the door so that when the door closes, it doesn't shut all the way. The magnets don't touch, so they can come in and rob people. And he went flying, the gun went flying, money went flying, and I took off flying. And I went back to South Carolina that night and decided I've given up on thug life. My first encounter with a real gangster let me know I didn't want to be no gangster. And that's the way a lot of our youth are that think they're gangsters, because they ain't never really met one. They've never, and those who call themselves gangsters, they're not gangsters whatsoever. Trust me. The loudest person in the room is usually the weakest person in the room. I don't like to say that because I'm usually always the loudest person in the room, but that's in a different context. Different context. So I decided to try to be a good person. You know, maybe God doesn't have any way of life for mankind, but maybe he'll show some favor on me when I die if I at least try to do good. Try to be a good person. There's a lot of people in life like that. They believe in God and they believe you just need to be good. But I had the same friends. So it was a problem. Same friends. Then I met a Muslim. And I didn't realize that I had known this Muslim for over a year. Never knew he was a Muslim. I'd been to his house sometimes on a daily basis after school. Never knew he was a Muslim. I'd even see him pull out this rug and do some weird stuff on it. Never knew he was a Muslim. There's a couple reasons why I didn't know he was a Muslim. Number one, he was an African American. And I thought all Muslims were Arabs, except for the Nation of Islam and 5%ers. For those of you who call rappers Muslims, most of them are 5%ers, by the way. There's a handful of Muslims that are still doing the rap business, and I know a few of them, like Freeway, Benny Siegel, a couple other guys. But the rest of these guys you call Muslim are 5%ers, and they believe they are Allah. They believe Allah means arm, leg, arm, head, and that they are the original people on earth, and their consciousness is what revealed the Quran. So yeah, keep calling these people Muslim if you want to. Anyway, not only that, but it was hard for me to understand that he was a Muslim because of his profession. He was the local cannabis salesman in Greenville, South Carolina. He was the weed guy. He was the dope man. And never really would, these two things wouldn't clay together. Muslim, African American. He wanted to be a rapper as well. He was a dope man. His name was Musa. We called him Blunt. And we used to go to his school. We used to go to his house after school and sit in ciphers. If you don't know what a cipher is, there's no need for you to know. Just let it be. And one day we were at his house after school, and I, like I said, I'd seen him pull that rug out, and he used to burn incense and stuff in his house. But I thought he practiced Santeria. Santeria is a religion of part of Christianity, and mixed with some black magic and things of that nature. They put spells to keep police away. It's not my expertise in Santeria, but I've met some West Indians, and he was from West Indian heritage that practiced Santeria. But one day the issue of religion came up at his house. In ciphers, when you're a little bit intoxicated, a lot of esoteric conversations end up taking place. And one of them came into the issue of religion. And I brought up the opinion that God has no religion. He never had a religion for mankind. And Musa was standing in the corner, and he said in his very New York slang, he was like, "Yo, son, you ever heard about Islam?" I'm like, "Yes, son, I heard all about Islam." Those bleeping, the things that we're called now. And he was like, "Hold on, son." He had turntables and things of that nature. He scratched the hold on a second. You're not going to disrespect my religion in my house. And I'm like, "What? What did you just say?" He said, "You're going to disrespect my religion in my house." I said, "You're not a Muslim." He said, "Yes, I am." I was like, "But you need to stop getting high off your own supply." You know what I mean? I'm not talking about 5%ers. I'm not talking about Nation of Islam. I'm talking about those camel jockey, towel head, saying, them guys. He's like, "Bro, I tell you to stop insulting me in this house." He said, "I'm a Sunni Muslim." And I was like, "Hold on a second. In that book, it said that there were Sunni and Shia Muslims, and they also killed each other. So I was like, "Bro, you can't be no Sunni Muslim. You're black." He was like, "Bro," he's like, "You don't think I know I'm black?" He's like, "This ain't no tan." And he's like, "Tell me what you know about Islam." And I told him, and he said, "You're a fool. Stupid, if you believe that." He said, if you believe that, you'll believe we landed on the moon as well. You know, he was one of those conspiracy guys. And I said, well, then you tell me about Islam, son. He said, I can't. I said, why not? He said, but look around you. I said, look what I do for a living. He's like, I'm not the person that needs to tell you about Islam. He said, but you can come with me to the mosque on Friday for Jummah. I didn't know what he said. I had no idea what. I knew Friday. He said, mosque is like a church and Jummah is like Sunday service, except it's on Friday and there's no chairs. You sit on the floor. Not a problem. Where are we going to go to a mosque? Because there's not one in Greenville. He said, yeah, there's one on Wayhampton Boulevard. It's like, dude, I live off Wayhampton Boulevard. There's no mosque. Trust me, there's no mosque in this town. Wayhampton is the main street that runs through my city. There's no mosque. I know the back of these streets. I am a street. I was a roadman on that time, you understand? I know the streets. You're not going to tell me there's a mosque in Greenville. I would know about it, trust me. He said it's on the corner of Wayhampton and Lee Road. I said, bro, I live on the corner of Wayhampton and Lee Road. That's where I live. That's my street, Lee Road. That's my street. I grew up there. I live there now. There's no mosque over there, buddy. He was like, you know, there's a missionary training church. I was like, yeah, that was the one that was on the farther end of my street. And it was across the corner. And it sits like this. He said there's another red brick building that sits in an L shape. And they almost touch. There's a walkway between them. And there's a parking lot that they both share. They use the same parking lot. You would think it's one building or one organization. I said, yeah, the gym. Because I thought that was like the sport facility. Because most churches in America have like a gym, a collegiate basketball gym, volleyball gym, stuff like that. He said, no, that's the mosque. I said, nah. He said, I'm telling you, it's the mosque. I was like, nah. He's like, I'll bet you $1,000 it's the mosque. I said, if it's the mosque, I'll be there on Friday. So he told me to meet him at 1:30. So on the way home, I stopped by there. Got out, walked over to the building. It had recently burned down and kind of been rebuilt. So there was no sign outside or nothing like that. And I walked up to the door because there was no windows either. The windows were like across the top of the wall. And right on the door, there was this little bitty sign that said Islamic Society of Greenville. You don't believe me? Go Google it. Google Maps. And I'm thinking to myself, there is a terrorist training facility at the end of my road. And I don't know anything about it. But where's the police? Where's the FBI? What's going on here? So I went home to my grandmother, did you know there's a mosque at the end of the street? She said, yeah. So why didn't you ever warn me? We used to go hang out there. We used to go skateboard right there. She was like, because those people don't bother anyone and we hardly ever see them. Hint, hint. I said, well, I'm going on Friday for their Jummah service. She said, all right, just be careful. 5 minutes, I'm done. Guaranteed. So on Friday, I go. And I sit outside of the church steps. One thing that Thug Life did teach me was don't trust people and don't get set up. Don't get set up. So I'm going to sit outside this mosque and see who goes in it. And then when Musa comes, I'm going to wait for him to go inside. And I'll go inside with him because if they don't kill him, they're not going to kill me. So I want to see who goes inside the mosque as well. And from my vantage point, I can only see the men's entrance. Because I'm also trying to be incognito. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to attract attention. So who do I see going in this mosque? Arab after Arab after Arab after Arab. Brown person after brown person after brown person. And all brown people were the same to me. Brown, you Arabs. But I now realize it was a heavily Pakistani and Bengali community. But again, you were all the same to me. There's Americans. Yeah. And then there's everybody else in the South. And you guys were everybody else. So Musa doesn't show up. He's not answering my pages. Come to find out he's not going to come because he got arrested for selling drugs. I've never seen him again till this day. I've never seen him again. I'm hoping that he dies upon the truth so that he can be rewarded for all of this that I'm doing right now. Yeah. It's also a reminder that if a drug dealer, aspiring hip-hop artist, can be the reason why I'm here doing this today, what's your excuse? What's your excuse? What excuse you got? Anyway, I was about to leave when a man pulled up and he parked next to me. And I promise you we're winding up. And he got out and I almost died laughing. Because he had two things that any man worth his salt in the South, any man with a soul would never put together. He had a big beard, which, trust me, in the South, we've always been about the beard. You know, we didn't wait for it to become fashion. You guys seen Duck Dynasty, right? Yeah. Ever heard of the show? Nope. It's a redneck show. We always had beards. Grown men had facial hair. That's the way it was. But you would never see a grown man with a big beard wearing a dress. This guy's got on a dress. What is he doing? These don't go. This is no. This is faux pas. You don't do this. Your man card is get revoked. That beard should be taken off. You don't deserve that thing. Anyway, he sees me looking and he comes up and he asks me, "Can I help you?" And he speaks English. I'm like, oh my God, the guy speaks English. I said, "Yeah, Musa invited me to your Friday thing." He's like, "Oh, we know Musa, just don't be surprised if he doesn't come." But he was very excited that I was there, which made me feel weird. This guy doesn't know me, he's too excited. Too happy. I don't like it. Anyway, I didn't see anybody but old men go in anyway. Well, I could take 5 of them. So I go in and they give me a chair at the back of the building and I'm sitting in front of all these Arabs in front of me. There's a curtain along the back, women behind it. I don't know how the hell they got in there. What are they doing there? Are these the slaves? You know what I mean? These the slave women that I've heard about, that I've read about. And I'm thinking to myself, why did Musa come and he didn't invite me? And now this guy's so excited. I'm sitting here with all these Arabs. There's these women behind the curtain. Who knows what the heck's going on back? What are you doing here? What am I doing here? This is not my place. So I get up to leave and everybody gets quiet. Because I'm thinking Musa set me up. He sold me to these Arab guys so they could do their little jihad and get their 72 virgins. I'm the sacrificial lamb for their virgins today. Might be them behind the curtain. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I'm freaking out right now, to be honest with you. I'm not getting set up. I'm leaving. So I get up to leave and everybody gets quiet. So I sit back down. There's too many of them. They might all be old, but man, there's about 70 people here. But then I realized the same guy that invited me up he's now standing on some stairs at the front of the room. And funny thing is, those stairs don't go anywhere. They're stairs to nowhere. They're like 3 stairs that just go into the wall. I'm like, yes. Definitely could be a better way to do that. So I was like, all right, let him start what he's going to start, and then I'm going to leave. Because between the exit and me is these guys. Or maybe behind the curtain, but I'm not finding out. So, and the first thing he's going to say is not, "Let's kill the white guy." That's not how it's going to start. You know, there's going to be some ceremony and some pomp and circumstance. And while they're focused on him, trust me, I'm faster than all these guys. I'm out. He begins his sermon, "Inna alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa na'udhu." And I'm like, oh my God. He is telling them to kill me for sure. Because the same guy that was so soft-spoken outside, he's screaming now. He's pounding on the thing and he's pointing at me. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. In my mind, the translation is, let's kill this white guy, let's get our virgins. And the only thing missing from this scene is for the curtain to come flying back, the women to start going, la, 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 the bucket to come out. But in my head, my heart is jumping out of my chest. You know, I'm ready to climb out that little bitty 2x2 window in the top of the roof now. You know what I mean? So I got to get out of here. I got to go. So my plan became, there was 3 old uncles sitting in front of me. I mean, old, frail. I'm knocking him out. This old uncle right there, he's about to get it. I'm knocking his jaw off. And while everybody's, caught by that, I'm gone. This is a diversion tactic. You know what I mean? Knocking him out and I'm out. And I was just about to do it. And alhamdulillah, Allah saved me from that. Can you imagine if I knocked that uncle out? I could have killed him. They would have talked about me to this day. This white guy came in here. Remember when the white guy come and knocked Uncle Javed out? Gora Pakora. He came in, killed Uncle, almost killed him. They would have never given. I would be remembered for eternity at that masjid. But before I decided to knock the uncle out, the guy stopped screaming in Arabic and he started translating English. Verily all praise belongs to Allah. We praise Him and we praise Him alone. We seek His assistance and His assistance alone. Whomsoever God guides to the truth cannot be misguided from it. And whomsoever God leads astray from the truth cannot be guided back into it except by Him. And I bear witness that nothing has the right to be worshipped except the one true Creator. And I bear witness that Muhammad is indeed His messenger. O you who believe, fear your guardian Lord as He should be feared, and do not die unless you have submitted yourself unto Him. O mankind, fear your guardian Lord who created you from one soul, and from that soul its mate. And from those two He spread the rest of progeny. And fear God from whom you demand your mutual right to the ties of kinship. For God is an ever watcher, and give reverence to the womb that gave you birth. For God is an ever watcher over everything that you do. O you who believe, fear God as He should be feared, and always speak the truth. For by doing so, God will guide you to righteous actions and forgive you of your sins. And whomsoever has obeyed Allah and His last messenger has indeed achieved the greatest achievement. At that moment, that caught my attention. I had never, ever heard anything like that, put together like that, powerful like that. So I wanted to hear what this man had to say. And his entire sermon that day was on the forgiveness of God and how God can forgive and things of this nature and is so forgiving and so merciful. I don't have the time because I know they're going to pull the plug on me in a moment. But after that, I watched the Muslims pray. And when I saw Muslims pray, I knew that it was true worship, because this is the way Abraham prayed. This is the way David prayed 3 times a day, facing the east. This is the way Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, face on the floor. This was worship. This was traditional worship. So I wanted to find out, let me ask these Muslims the same thing I asked every other religion. So after the sermon, I asked the Imam, I said, do you have some proof that your religion is the truth like you say it is? He gave me a copy of the Quran. He said, this is the book of God. I said, I've heard that. He said, this is God's word, heard that. I went home and I read the Quran. To make a long story short, even shorter than it's already been. I mean, longer than, not to be that I haven't been short already. But the Quran was it. That was it for me. After reading the Quran, chapter 2, verse 2 of the Quran is the reason why I read the whole book. Because the book challenged me. That this is the book that has no doubt. And that is a guidance for those who fear God. That was a challenge. There is no religious text on the face of this planet that starts with such a bold claim about itself. That it is a book that has no contradiction, no errors. So I continued to read the book to prove it wrong. And then I kept getting challenged again. That if you're in doubt about this book, then bring something like it, equal to it. And when you can't, and call for your helpers, whoever you want. And when you fail, which you will fail, fear the fire whose fuel is men and stones. Had this book been from other than God, you would find in it contradiction. I mean, the book just keeps challenging me and challenging me and challenging me. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way on God's green earth these Muslims have the right book. But by the time I closed the Quran, reading about the stories of Moses, Noah, Lot, David, Jesus, reading the stories about God's oneness, His paradise, what He wanted from human beings, to be obeyed and to be worshipped, the same God I found in the Old Testament, I'm finding here. By the time I closed the Quran, I said, that's it. This is it. This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. And it wasn't so much I had done an extensive research on the Quran. I just knew. It was one of those times where when you know, you know. You know, you know. And I accepted Islam the next day in December of 1998. And let me tell you one thing. For the past 17 years of being a Muslim, I've spent extensive time going through this same book again. And not in the English language, from its original language. It is a perfect book. It's challenged mankind for 14 centuries to disprove one verse of it, to discredit one statement, to find fault in one fact, to bring anything like it or even similar to it in its nature. And for 14 centuries, that has failed. People have tried and tried and tried, and they have failed. That book has stood the test of time. It is perfect. Therefore, if that book is perfect, when the Imam asked me, why do I believe, or how I should believe in the Prophet Muhammad, I asked him, did the Prophet Muhammad give us this book? He said, yes. I said, then he is who he says he is. That's all I need to know about him. Because this book is flawless. It is perfect. Therefore, it is from the perfect God, and the medium would have been who he said he was. So I accepted Islam 17 going on 18 years next year. But I didn't come to entertain you. You know what I mean? They could have put a video. You got a big screen right here. They could have put any of the times I've told this story. And I want to answer your questions. But first, I want to leave you knowing that the reason I'm telling you what I'm telling you is because I want you to understand that there are people just like me out in the streets of London right now, being fooled by the media, believing ignorantly about you, being spoon-fed whatever nonsense they hear about what you are and who you are and what you believe. And unless someone comes and corrects that information, this is what they're going to believe. We are a community that is in a predicament of our own doing. The media is not to blame for why you're in this state of Islamophobia. The non-Muslims are not to be blamed for why you're in this state of Islamophobia. You solely, squarely are to be blamed. You've been here for over 2 generations in this country, minimally, as a significant population. There's 2 million plus of you in this country, on this island in the middle of the ocean, this rock in the middle of the ocean. There's over 2 million of you. And yet, if there was a national poll taken tomorrow, let me be clear with you about this. If there was a national poll taken tomorrow and everyone turned out and vote, and that vote was whether you should be allowed to stay in this country or not, you would be packing your bags. And if you do not think so, you're living in a fool's paradise. Because even the people that don't think negative about you would vote you out just out of safety caution, just out of overly cautious. The same thing for America, the same thing for Europe, the same thing for Australia, the same thing for Canada. And who are we going to continue to blame? We've been in these countries for sometimes over 100 years. You know why? Because you are not showing the positive influence that Islam is supposed to have on society. You're not showing it. You're doing all the talking and very little of the working. The companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, 2, 3, 4 of them would go to a place and that place would change for better because of them. And let me guarantee you, if they spent 100 years in a place and it didn't change and it hated them and wanted them to leave, they would have left already. They would have left already. There is a poverty problem in England and you act as if someone else is responsible for taking care of it. There is a homelessness problem in England and you're acting as if someone else is responsible. There are societal ills such as gambling, drug addiction, alcoholism, spousal abuse, child abuse. Things that Islam speaks clearly about and gives us clear formulations from the Creator how to solve. And you act as if it's someone else's job. That's why they hate you. And that's your fault. That's no one else's fault. You know, I just read a study, and I promise I'm done, but I don't care if you didn't forget all, you forget everything I just said. You need to know this. You know, there was a study that said that the Muslims of England were the most charitable minority community. How many of you read that statistic? That the Muslims of the UK were the most charitable. Guess what fact they didn't put in there that I know? That fact may be true, but the majority of that money did not leave the Muslim community. Did it? No. The majority of that money did not leave the Muslim community. I know it for a fact. It did not help the homeless people on the streets of London. It didn't help the sick and elderly on the streets of London. It didn't help the orphans in London. That's why if they could vote you out, they would, because you're not doing anything. And if you are, it's nowhere near enough, because if so, you wouldn't be like this. So what do you need to do? You need to fix up. Start producing results. Start getting involved. Our Prophet, peace be upon him, when he called to Islam, he based that call on his character. When he stood in Mecca, he stood on a hilltop and said, you know me. You know me. If I told you an army was on the other side of this mountain to kill you, would you believe me? They said, yes. He was known as Al-Amin before he was known as An-Nabi. Now here we are, when Islamophobia gets rampant, we show up. Yeah, here we are, here's the Muslims, we're okay, we're peaceful. Where you been at for the past 20 years? We don't know you. You see, that's the problem. We're ready to pop out of the holes every time Islamophobia gets rampant, when those grassroots should have been laid years ago. You should have been doing that years ago. We got to change. Stop apologizing for things you're not involved in. If your neighbor killed his wife, they wouldn't come ask you to apologize for it in court. So don't be apologizing for things that Muslims do on the other side of the planet or even down the street because it didn't have anything to do with you. But if you want to apologize for something, apologize for the fact that you have not been as influential on your society for positive change as you need to have been. And you'll try to affect and change that. If this community does not become a positive, effective change on the society, you will not be welcome in this country at one point. And if you think I'm fooling, and you think I'm overhyping it, keep sleeping. But make sure you're building your house in some other country, because you're going to need to go there one day. I thank you very much for your time, and for our audience online, thank you very much. We have quite a few people following and watching with us tonight live, alhamdulillah, and look forward to seeing you guys inshallah this weekend at the Steps to Allah conference for our online viewers. Assalamu